powerful and loaded. It has a little bit of learning curve, but if you cross that, you will become a sort of a wizard of Linux. It looks very sort of a kind of magical, but it also has incredible capabilities. And best part is that you can change any code and nobody will tell anything to anybody. Okay, nobody will shout at you, nobody will sell your stuff. So open source, that's where open source comes in. It's like, you know, you customize that existing tool for your own purpose as you deem it appropriate for your needs. So the granddaddy is Unix, which was written by AT&T, and that code, when it was booted on Intel grade PC chips by Linus, to honor him, it was named as Linux. So Linux is Unix code running on PC grade chips. And again, sort of Unix started replacing other bad operating systems. All right. So today, what I'll try to do is that walk you through some of the basic, very basic Linux commands. People might have told you that Linux is very hard. It is not actually. So you'll see how we can do everything from command line. There is no need of mouse, you know, and you can do a lot of stuff just from command line. And that's why it's so powerful. You know, it's like if you are entering or processing 1 million names, and if you start doing mouse, 1 million mouse clicks will kill your hand. We don't need to do that. We can automate that in Linux so that there is no mouse is required. So let's start with some of these tidbits, and you'll see how Linux is useful. So first, outline. What are the basics? Okay. What are the foundations of this? What is the command line structure? Because command lines are very powerful. There is one command and there are multiple switches. And depending on the switch, the output will be very different. Processing will be very different. And whole behavior of command will actually be changed. Then we'll see how we understand files and directories in Linux and how we can explore it just from command line, or you know, we can change directories, and make new files, delete new files, permissions, etc. Then we'll talk about system resources, how you can print and all that stuff. Then we'll talk about Unix shells, which has its own sort of a whole bunch of library and its own commands. And by putting together those commands, we can write what is known as shell programs, okay, scripts. So I'll show you how you can use Unix shell programs, small commands, to make shell scripts, which will do a lot of stuff in batch mode, okay, like text processing, video processing. Your game files are generated, they can be sort of processed. If you're a graphical person, a lot of graphics files can be processed. This is very useful in bioinformatics, where large I mean, incredible amount of data is generated, either through genetics or imaging. For example, let's say you have data of 1 million, cervograms of cancerous women. How do you even catalog that? Okay, so that's where this kind of very, very high performance systems comes into the picture. Then you can manipulate those things automatically and do a lot of things which you cannot do with kind of things and with mouse and so on. So you'll see as you move forward, you will get a sort of grip on the whole system. All right. A large number of slides are there on Linux. I'm just using a old version knowingly so that you get to the basics. And later version like 2021 are very, very sophisticated. So you can see some of the resources. Now philosophy. Okay, you already understood.
I want to ask one thing, sir. Which book students should prefer? Do you recommend some textbook?
No, none. These slides are enough.
Okay.
I'll share 2-3 slides. One about Linux philosophy, like open source versus freeware. Second is this Unix commands, and third is scripting. That's it. Okay. After that, they can use any book they deem appropriate. No particular recommendation.
Okay, sir.
But what they should do is solve real life problems rather than just doing bookish toy problems. They should focus. For example, they can take vote data from government and they can process it. For example, I want to see voting patterns in, let's say, Bihar districts. So I can superimpose all the voting patterns on, let's say, Google Map. That will be a beautiful and incredible visualization of how people are voting. And if you do of multiple years, you will see dynamic patterns that how voting field is changing. Do you understand? It will behave like a partial differential equation, because you will have a lot of snapshot at different years, and the video will be just incredible as in how voting pattern is changing. Is it a political issue? Is it demographics? Is it religion? Is it government subsidy? Is it casteism? So you can analyze that how this whole voting pattern is fascinating with different factors, both external and internal. So a lot of those things can be done, and government is now releasing a lot of data. I don't know if it's authentic or fake, but data.gov has apparently a lot of data Indian government is now releasing. So it's very important that children play with real case studies rather than just concocted ones. Is that fine? The motivation?
Okay, sir, sure.
Okay. So first Unix philosophy, it was developed by Thomson and Ritchie, very, very powerful people in AT&T. And why they did it? Because AT&T was at its peak in 60s, handling millions or maybe billions of calls. And it was becoming impossible to keep track of them, do the billing, keep the quality and all that stuff. So to manage them, they needed a computing system. So you see, beauty is that the computing system was developed to help telecommunication. Okay, now it's the other way around. Telecommunication is helping computing. So these things keep happening. The idea is to further, humanity cause and solve human problems. So nobody is bigger. It's not like telecommunication is bigger or computing is bigger. They both help each other whenever they can. That's the way to think about it. All right. So first, most important point is that Unix is a multi-user system and it can run multiple jobs in parallel. That was a revolution in the time when systems used to be single user and they could do only one job at a time. All right. So that's why Unix has built-in security. For example, file permissions, as you will see later. You cannot touch anybody's file unless they give you permission. You cannot change them, you cannot read them, write them, execute them, and things like that. You'll see what I mean by that. Then large number of tools were built in for common tasks. For example, what is the date today? Who is logged into the system? How can I count number of words or lines in a file or even letters? And everything was open knowingly because one tool can be used in multiple ways depending on the imagination of users. And it was all kept open so that it can be extended, meaning some tool is written and you want to add another feature, functionality, GUI, or whatever else you deem appropriate can be added. And that is the whole beauty of openness, right? So one more thing which is not written here, you should note down, that is evolvability. So flexibility, extendability, and evolvability. All Unix programs are evolving. Today, they are being used for completely new sort of applications. For example, genetic data analysis. That's not what they were meant for. But a whole new suites are emerging for very, very specialized, for example, geospatial data processing. All these are new applications, and Unix has coped up with these new applications very well. Actually, it has been the tool of choice for multiple very, very data intensive applications, because any other operating system, forget about competition, it doesn't even come close because it can't even run in a long term. You use any market grade operating system, it will collapse after 1, 2 day, 3 day. Whereas Unix or Linux can go for months, years, like that. And that is very important when you are running mission critical systems. For example, a satellite or a file or a ship. It's very important that your computing doesn't let you down. Now, the most important point, which I was telling you, Unix was designed by programmers for programmers. So people who designed, they were not kidding. They did not have market in mind. They had their programmer users in mind. And that's why you will see it is very sophisticated and helpful to people who understand programming. Okay. And this is the structure, sort of. So hardware is at the center for obvious reason. And the way application layer talks to hardware is through system calls. For example, it wants to get time. So there is a function called date. It will interact with the kernel and system calls and get the time from hardware. So this is sort of just intuitive organization that hardware is the most important part, that's core. And then you have the system calls padding between the user who will run the program and the hardware. So system calls kind of bridge the notion between hardware and user. And if you open a Linux system, which you can download as an app on your if you explore, you'll see these directories, basic directory. Bin is binary, all the executable commands will be there, etc. Will have some files, including password, which gives you access. Group structures, library will have a lot of libraries related to software. User will have its own bin, man, local, etc., and a whole bunch of files. Man means manual, short for. They will have all the hardware devices like your terminal and things like that. Dump is a sort of a temporary file holder. If a program needs temporary space, they can use dump. And home is where users are. So there can be pranjan 1, pranjan 2, or switch and things like that. Every user will have mail, bin, source of its own. Okay. So you can see slash is a root directory. Slash bin Unix command. Yeah, bin means binary executable commands. And home directory can be slash home pranjan 1, slash home pranjan 2, slash home switch and then like that. And if you open your Linux system, you'll see this already.
It's a mostly forward slash, right?
It's always forward slash.
Okay.
Okay, so backward slash is used to mask the star characters, mask the wild characters. For example, star means match anything, right? But if I put a backslash and then star, then it will be treated as just a character, not a wild card. Okay, so if you want to take out the special meaning of Linux characters, you put a backslash. Otherwise, it's always forward slash. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. All right. So shell is just a command line interpreter. Shell. So everything is a program, right? So shell is also a program which takes a name of the command as a input and executes that program. So in front of shell, I type ls. Ls means list all the files. So to list all the files. Okay. And if you have your Linux with you, you can try that. So shell takes the command line, the name of a program and executes that program for you, right? Now, the way a program or command line interacts with the kernel, it can be in multiple ways. It can be a built-in shell script, for example, listing, ls, date, or many other things, man, things like that. You'll see there is a whole library. Or there can be a interpreted script. You can make a script out of shell commands. So you write a whole bunch of shell commands in a file, and they'll be executed sequentially, and that can be a script. And the third part, which is the most important, is compiled object code file. Meaning I write a C program, Java program, C++ program, Python code, or Python will not have compiled, but others have compiled code. So you compile the code and generate a sort of a.out or executable, and those can be also run as a executable file on shell. So 3 types of these commands are there, and you can use any of them in any order. Now, just to log in, you need a password. Okay. And when you type the command password, it will change your password. Once you supply your old password, it will ask you, prompt you to give new password. And it will only do it on your local host machine. So this is just to give you sort of how to manage your password. And when you type logout, obviously it will log you off the system. But password is the only credential here. So keep it carefully, make it big and all that, so that nobody steals it. So difference between logout is that logout will just shut down the session and user will be out. Whereas exit means only leaves that particular shell. So I have 2-3 externs. I type exit, only that particular extern will be closed. My session will still go on. Now here are some command line structures, how a typical command is formed. So command have 2 things, options and arguments. Okay. So options means switches. Command will behave differently with different options. And for each option, there will be an argument, right? So for example, I want to use the command wc, which is count words, right? So wc will have, if you do -l, dash l, it will count lines. If you do -w, it will count words. If you do -c, it will count characters. And then in argument, you give them a file name, right? So this will be the typical structure. And if you do whatever command you have in mind, man command, man means manual, you will see so many different types of options and arguments in which command can be used. I don't think anybody understands the whole Linux or Unix properly, but you can try to grasp as much as you can, and the fun will begin, right? So white space, that is space or tab, separates parts of the command line. These are trivial things. An argument indicates objects on which the command operates. For example, wc will operate on the file given. An option modifies the command, usually starts with dash. For example, wc-c, wc-l, wc-w. Option and syntax for a command are given on the man page, which is a manual page. And this is how you can do man command. So let's say man wc, right? And if I don't remember the command, I can search. So man minus k count words. I can say like that. I will throw WC and many other commands. Okay, but man is the sort of way to learn new command. Okay, on online tutorials also there are on every command, so you can look at slides if you like more picturesque and sort of easy way to learn. Then you have PWD, print working directory. Current directory will be printed. You can do CD to change working directory.
I think PWD and CD are the mostly MKDIR. These are the or NILS. These are the most commonly used, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm going through the most useful ones first. So
Right.
PW will tell you where you are right now. Current station. Okay. If you do CD dot, move one level. Okay. If you do CD tilde, you'll go to home, and then you can do CD to any other directory. Okay, and all I can do is based on command line only. I don't need to move the mouse at all. mkdir will make a directory, okay, with proper permissions. rmdir will remove a directory only if it is empty. If the directory is not empty, rmdir will not work. Okay, ls has multiple versions. So you'll see ls means list directory contents. All the files and directories will be listed, and there are multiple formats of listing. For example, ls-l will be long listing. ls-a will list all files, including those which system files, which start with dot. And once you execute it, you'll get a hang of it. That's what ls does. And ls is very, very useful command. So these are some of the basic commands. If there is any question, I can answer because this is important.
No, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move forward. Now there is a long listing, right? So the way to think about it is that there are multiple attributes of every file and directory. And if that attribute starts with D, it means the file is a directory. I mean, that object is a directory, and L is for link. And there are 3 access permissions for owner, group, and others. And there are 3 characters for each of them, meaning 3 characters for owner, 3 characters for group, and 3 characters for others. What do those 3 characters mean? Read, write, and execute. So RWX. Okay. So RWX is very, very important. So who gets what permission depends on what permission has been given. If you're denied, a dash will appear. Okay. And permissions can be changed with chmod, and owner or group change with chown or chgrp. Okay. So there are multiple representations of RWS, and then there are binary representations. You will see how we can change these things. So here it is. So use plus and minus with a single letter. U means user, who is the owner of the file. G is group. O is others. A includes everyone. So chmod u plus w, meaning give user right permission to a particular file name. Okay, whatever file you build, this will add a write permission for user. This will add read permission for group. This will remove read permission for all of them. Okay. There are also numeric representations for these permissions. Now, a little bit of I mean delete file. Okay, and obviously you should have permission to delete, because if you don't own the file, you may not be able to delete. Similarly, copy, move a file or directory, right? Move a file means just rename it. Okay. Copy will create a new copy, whereas move will just rename that file. Now some little bit of care. So great care with RM. Remove, you should not use remove, generally speaking. If you don't like some data, you think it's burden, you just take backup and remove it from your system. Don't do this remove part. It's a bad idea, because my experience shows that what you remove today might be needed tomorrow. So philosophy is that you backup, don't remove. Okay. And if you do remove star, for obvious reason, it will remove everything in your directory, and you might regret that. Okay. A move can copy over an existing file, that can create problems. And most people modify remove to be remove minus I, which means interactive form, meaning it will ask before removing files. But what my take on all these things is that just don't remove. Don't use the command at all. You don't like a file or a directory, back it up, take it out from the system. But keep it, because tomorrow you might need it. History is more important in computing than otherwise in real life. with a very high probability, you might need the commands or files you have downloaded earlier or written some program earlier. So keep them. And backup is not that hard. For 3,000-4,000, you'll find 2 TB now. So you can easily back it up. Okay. And if you want to indeed remove, then you can use /rm, which will remove all its rm minus I and all that, and it will start deleting large bunch of files. Okay. Some simple commands again. Echo, and whatever you write in double quote, it will just put it on the screen. So for example, you say echo double quote begin, hello Swechandan double quote close. So you will write that on the screen. So you can use that to generate greetings and things like that, make it user friendly. Now you can concatenate a whole bunch of files. Okay. Head will display first 10 lines of a file. Similarly, tail will display last 10 lines of a file. And you can paginate by doing more or less. Okay. So you can use them to go through a file. So generally more is used in pipe. So there's the idea of pipe. What you do is that you say cat and whatever file you want to see, it needs to be typed, and then you do a pipe, that vertical line, and type more. So whatever is being demonstrated, the file which is being shown will start paginating automatically. So that's how it is used. It's very, very important that large files are paginated so that you don't get overwhelmed. Okay. So when you are paginating, the space bar moves one page down and enter moves one line down. B back one page and Q quits. And you can also search in that by typing /word, and it will find it out for you. So slowly, once you do it, you get used to it. No big deal. Then, unlike many other market operating systems where processes hang and you have to boot it, Linux and Unix have far better process management. You can do by doing, for example, ps-eu pranjan. So you can see all my processes, however many processes are running.
Like task manager.
Yeah. So task manager may or may not come up, but this will come up for sure. This will not hang. Okay. So ps-u pranjan, you will see a whole bunch of processes listed. And let's say my Firefox is not working, and Firefox is process ID is 7594. So just say kill -97594. Only Firefox will be killed. Nothing else will be killed. System will remain healthy. And no rebooting or any of that stuff is required. Okay. So processes are very well organized as a program, and you can kill one process without affecting anybody else. So there's a beautiful way of managing processes, and that's what brings a stability and sort of durability to this system, because processes can be managed each thread at a time and without affecting anybody else. And this kind of facility is not there in other operating systems where you kill one program and the whole system might reboot because the code is not implemented properly. Any questions on process management? Okay, then some inquiries you can do from system. Who will list who are the current users logged in a system? Who am I will tell you information about you. Okay. Then where is, so where is, you will find the location of a program, which will also find location of a program. Okay. You'll find them useful. Then host name will tell you what is the name of the machine being used. Uname will tell you print information. So uname -a, if you do, it will give you all the information. Uname -o will give you operating system. Uname -p will give processor, etc. Here is date. So date has multiple sort of formatting. If you just type date, it will give you the local sort of timeline. And if you do date -u, it will give you universal time. And then you can format it in whatever way you want, A, T, D, Y, J, etc. Okay, so this will give you all the sort of ways of how you want to display your date, and based on date you can write triggers, programs, things like that. If it's morning, it will tell you good morning and all that stuff. Printing right now is not required, so I'll not go through this. Skip. What is needed is compression and archiving. A lot of children are playing games, and those games are generating large number of files. So you need this because what you can do is that you can tar those games and their output, and then you can gzip it. So you tar the file, that will generate some game.tar, and then when you gzip, it will generate game.tar.gz or .tz. Okay, and when you want to sort of decompress it, you first use gunzip and then tarf. So here is the compression part. So tar, cf, text files, .tar, all the text files will be put in this. And then I gzip that. So I'll get text file.tar.gz. Okay. Now on the reception side, I unzip it. So I'll get text files.tar, and then I extract it. tar.xf text files.tar will give me all the text files which were included in the original file. Okay, and this is so useful because a lot of data which is being generated by games and other media is not very dense, it's sparse. So there is a lot of potential into compression. If you compress, file may become 5% or 10% of it. Let's say you have a 1 GB game, I mean, it compresses to 5 or 10%. You can see you can come to 100 MB or 50 MB. So if you are transferring game or its output to a friend, this thing will come in very handy. A 1 GB file will take forever to transfer, whereas 50 MB you can just transfer quickly. And this is true for any data, like I told you. Biology people have find it very useful. Geospatial people find very, very useful. Voting people, any place where data is being generated, this is very useful. So again, the same thing. There are multiple ways of doing the same thing. Okay, you can do the whole directory and things like that. And the most modern shell, the first shell was SH. Now we have what we have is known as a bash. Okay, it's called Bourne shell, and this is lately the default shell on Linux. Very smart, and it actually extends the first shell SH and includes a lot of commands added in CSH, which was a C shell, and then there was TCSH, which is turbo C shell. So all these are sort of granddaddy of bash, and bash supersedes all of that.